The city was drowning in rain, every drop hammering the pavement like the ticking of a relentless clock. People rushed past with umbrellas, darting into cafes and buses, seeking shelter from the storm. She stood alone by the bookstore steps, clutching her worn notebook against her chest, but the pages were already spotted with water. Her cheap umbrella had broken with the first gust of wind. Its thin metal ribs bent out of shape, leaving her exposed to the downpour. He saw her before she saw him, a tall figure emerging from the black car that had just pulled over at the curb, his driver bowing quickly before shutting the door. The man walked with a measured pace, his umbrella wide, sleek, almost commanding the rain itself to part for him. The world seemed to make space wherever he stepped. Strangers glanced twice, sensing the presence of someone powerful, but he paid them no mind. His eyes had fixed on the girl with the ruined umbrella. She brushed her wet hair from her face, annoyed more at herself than at the storm. The notebook was filled with fragments of dreams she could barely afford to believe in. Stories she scribbled during lunch breaks at the small cafe where she worked. Stories no one else cared to read. Tonight she had hoped to write in peace after finishing her shift. But the rain had other plans. His steps slowed. Something about the way she held that notebook, like it was more precious than the coat she didn't wear, more important than the phone she had forgotten to shield, pulled him in. Against reason, against the rigid schedule that ruled his nights, he found himself walking toward her. Here, his voice was low, steady. He extended his umbrella without hesitation. She blinked up, startled, her lips parting but no sound leaving them at first. Then a quick shake of her head. "No, it's fine. You'll get wet. I don't mind." The answer came too quickly, almost surprising himself. The umbrella shifted, covering both of them. The rain, suddenly muted overhead, left only the sound of their breaths mixing in the narrow space. She noticed the faint scent of cedar from his suit, the warmth of someone who carried authority even in silence. He noticed the trembling of her fingers around the soaked notebook, the stubbornness in her eyes as if refusing pity. Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. He could have said nothing. He could have walked away, left her in the storm. Yet words escaped before his mind approved them. "Because if I walked past and did nothing, I'd regret it." The answer hung in the damp air, heavier than the storm itself. For the first time, she looked directly at him. His features were sharp, almost cold, the kind of face one sees on magazine covers, untouchable. But his eyes betrayed something else, loneliness perhaps, or the exhaustion of someone who had fought battles invisible to others. She didn't know his name, didn't know he was a man whose signature could move entire companies, whose family owned half the skyline they stood beneath. All she saw was a stranger who chose to stand in the rain with her. The traffic roared, neon lights blurred by the curtain of water. A bus stopped nearby, its doors opening with a hiss. She hesitated, glancing at it, then back at him. "Go," he said almost reluctantly. "You'll catch a cold." She wanted to ask for his name, wanted to know who this stranger was who had offered her a piece of calm in a storm. But the bus driver honked impatiently. She stepped back, clutching the notebook tighter. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the rain. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowded bus, its lights vanishing into the night. He remained on the steps, his umbrella still open though the rain didn't touch him anymore. For a long moment, he stared at the space where she had stood, wondering why a brief encounter could shake him more than any deal, any victory, any empire he had ever claimed. The driver appeared again, holding another umbrella for him, but he didn't move. His heart, for reasons he couldn't yet admit, felt as though it had been stolen by a girl with a broken umbrella and a water-stained notebook. And somewhere inside that departing bus, she pressed her damp notebook against her chest and smiled faintly through the foggy window, not realizing her story had just collided with his. The rain kept falling, but destiny had already begun to write its own pages. The next evening, the rain had stopped but the city still shimmered with its memory. Puddles reflected neon lights, and the air smelled of asphalt washed clean. She wiped the counter at the cafe where she worked, the notebook once again at her side. The words she had scribbled after meeting the stranger haunted her. Half-formed sentences about umbrellas, about destiny, about a man whose eyes looked like they carried storms of their own. Her friend Mina leaned over the counter. "You've been smiling at nothing all day. Did something happen? Tell me." She shook her head quickly, hiding the notebook. "It's nothing. Just a story idea." "A story, huh? Well, your stories must be getting better. You're glowing." Mina winked, but she didn't press further. The bell above the door chimed. She turned automatically, greeting the new customer with a polite smile, and then froze. He was there, the man from the rain. He looked impossibly out of place among the chatter of students and office workers, his tailored suit too perfect, his presence too commanding. Yet his eyes searched until they landed on her, and for a fleeting moment, his stern mask cracked into something softer. "Good evening," he said, his voice even, though his heartbeat had quickened. She fumbled with the cloth in her hands. You're here. I was passing by." It was a lie. He had instructed his driver to find out where she worked after the umbrella incident. He had replayed her voice in his mind all night, the quiet "thank you" under the rain, and it had unsettled him more than any boardroom battle ever had. Mina raised her eyebrows, glancing between them, then discreetly retreated to the back. "What would you like to order?" she asked, regaining composure. "Anything you recommend." Her hands trembled slightly as she made his drink. When she placed it on the counter, he noticed the edges of her notebook poking from beneath the tray. The cover was wrinkled, the ink inside probably smudged from the storm. "You write," he said, not a question but a statement. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "I saw how you protected that notebook. More than yourself." Heat rose to her cheeks. She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "It's nothing important. Just silly ideas." His lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "Silly ideas make empires. Don't dismiss them so easily." No customer had ever spoken to her like that. The sincerity in his tone, the weight in his words, made her feel her stories might actually matter. He sipped his drink, then leaned closer. "Tell me one." Her pulse raced. Now? Now?" She hesitated, but something in his gaze compelled honesty. She flipped open the notebook and read aloud a fragment. A story of a girl who found shelter under a stranger's umbrella, not realizing fate had tied them together long before. His chest tightened. She was writing about them. When her voice trailed off, she laughed nervously. "See? Just silly." But he didn't laugh. Instead, he asked quietly, "Do you believe in destiny?" The question caught her off guard. She bit her lip, considering. "I don't know. Maybe it's not destiny. Maybe it's just choices we make, and the courage to take them." His eyes lingered on her face, memorizing the conviction there. He wanted to ask her name, wanted to tell her his, but before he could, his phone buzzed sharply. His assistant's voice came through, urgent, demanding his presence at a late-night meeting. His world never let him linger long. He stood reluctantly. "I have to go." She nodded, hiding the disappointment tugging at her chest. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek business card, and slid it across the counter. "If your silly ideas ever need someone to read them, call me." Her eyes widened at the embossed logo, at the name printed in silver. She had heard of this man. Everyone had. He wasn't just wealthy. He was the heir of an empire, the kind of figure who existed in newspapers, not in cafes. By the time she looked up, he was already gone, leaving only the faint warmth of his presence and the card burning in her hand. That night, she sat by her window, the card on her desk. She whispered his name softly, almost afraid it would shatter if spoken too loud. She wanted to call, but fear held her back. What did a man like him see in a girl like her? Meanwhile, in a high-rise office lit against the midnight sky, he dismissed his assistant and leaned back in his chair. The city sprawled beneath him, but his mind was elsewhere, at a small cafe, with a girl whose laughter felt like sunlight piercing his storm. For the first time in years, he ignored the contracts waiting for his signature. He closed his eyes, replaying her words. Maybe it's not destiny. Maybe it's just choices we make. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he had made, offering an umbrella to a stranger, was about to change everything. And outside, as the city settled into silence, the forecast whispered of rain returning soon. Rain returned 3 nights later, heavier than before. The streets glistened, traffic lights blurred in red and green against the streaming glass of cafe windows. She sat at her desk, staring at his business card again. The silver letters seemed to glow whenever lightning struck the sky. Her heart wrestled with itself, fear whispering she didn't belong in his world, courage urging her to dial his number. Finally, with trembling fingers, she pressed the call button. "Hello!" His voice, deep and steady, carried across the storm like an anchor. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She almost hung up, but then softly, "It's me. The girl with the broken umbrella." He paused, then exhaled, almost like relief. "I was hoping you'd call." That night they met again, this time not by accident, but by choice. He arrived at the quiet riverside park, umbrella in hand, his suit abandoned for something simpler. She walked toward him nervously, clutching her notebook as if it could protect her heart. "I thought you'd never call," he said, his gaze locking on hers. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But then I realized, if I don't take this step, I'll regret it forever." He smiled faintly, and in that smile, she saw the weight he carried. "Do you know how rare it is for someone to speak to me without fear? Everyone either wants something from me or stays silent. You make me forget I'm supposed to be untouchable." The words disarmed her. She had expected distance, arrogance, but not this confession of loneliness. They began to meet more often, secretly at first. Late-night walks under the same umbrella, coffee shared in quiet corners of the city. Her stories read aloud as he listened with the intensity of a man starved of honesty. She showed him worlds that didn't revolve around money or power. He showed her vulnerability behind the steel walls he had built. But destiny rarely unfolds without resistance. One evening, news broke across the city's financial headlines. Photographs of him at the cafe, whispers of a girl unsuitable for his status. His family, his board of directors, even the media demanded answers. They expected him to deny her, to discard her like a mistake. She saw the reports too. Customers whispered. Mina looked at her with wide eyes, and shame flushed her skin. She felt the walls of his world closing in, walls she had no strength to climb. That night, she left a single note tucked inside her notebook and disappeared. When he arrived at the cafe, desperate, only Mina was there. She handed him the notebook, her expression grim. "She told me to give you this." He opened it, pages damp with her tears. On the last page, her words cut into him like glass. "I don't belong in your world. Maybe all I was meant to give you was a memory under the rain. Thank you for letting me believe even for a little while." For the first time in years, he felt powerless. No deal could fix this, no signature could bring her back. He stood outside the cafe in the pouring rain, the umbrella useless in his hand, his chest hollow. Days passed. He searched the city. Train stations, libraries, the riverside where they had walked. But she was gone. His empire continued around him. Meetings, contracts, speeches, but his heart was no longer present. Then, one evening, fate intervened. A charity event, filled with glittering gowns and empty laughter, became the stage. He stood on the balcony, exhausted by the pretense, when he heard a familiar voice behind him, timid yet unmistakable. "I didn't think I'd see you again." He turned, and there she was, dressed simply among the diamonds and silk, clutching her notebook as if it were armor. His chest ached with relief. "You left," he said, voice trembling. "I thought it was the only way to protect you," she whispered. "Protect me? You are the only thing that's kept me alive these weeks." He stepped closer, eyes burning with something unspoken. "Don't ever leave again. If there's a storm, we'll face it together. If there's a world that says no, then we'll build our own." Her tears spilled, but this time, they weren't of regret. He reached for her hand, pulling her close, the murmurs of the crowd fading until there was only them. "You once asked if I believed in destiny," he said softly. "Now I know. Destiny is an umbrella in the rain that brought me to you." She laughed through her tears, leaning into him. "Then let's never close it." Outside, rain began to fall again, steady and endless. But beneath the umbrella he held over them, warmth bloomed. The storm could rage, the world could judge, but for the first time they weren't afraid. And as he kissed her under the night sky, with rain dancing around them like applause, the notebook slipped from her hand, its pages fluttering open. Words written long ago seemed to whisper into the night. Love is not found. It is chosen, again and again, even in the storm. The umbrella shielded them, but destiny had already bound their hearts.